what do you make of the way she's dressed and also the way she's turned to a jury? Because there's another side of this. Oh, by the way, we don't have Natisha, I'm learning, so that gives me a chance to go to John Manuelian, who's sitting right next to us, criminal defense attorney. All right, John, she's testifying. She's turned a little bit to the jury. And look, I know people in the legal industry who would say, wait a second, she's in a sense being a little bit flirtatious to the jury. She smiled at them as she walked off the stand. Maybe that could be a good thing for Dr. Murray. How does it play out to you as a criminal defense attorney?
You know what? Honestly, I don't think it matters. That's the reason they didn't ask one question. They used the so what defense. At the end of the day, not asking a question says a lot. It says, so what? We don't care what these girls say. They're not going to remember these girls when they're deliberating.
Wait, are you sure it doesn't say, so what? This isn't looking good, very good for us, and we want her to get off the stand as quickly as possible?
I think these girls are very memorable, and they are going to be remembered. I disagree with you.
If you remember in Casey Anthony's case, all the lies came out in the beginning of the case, and nobody remembered when it came down to deliberating. The same thing's going to happen here. All of this is going to be just smoke and mirrors. It's going to come down to the nuts and bolts. What caused the death of Michael Jackson, and did he breach the standard of care, period.
All right, we got to talk about this more, but I'll tell you what, powerful witnesses on the stand today, the women taking center stage. I'll tell you what, she's got flair. She's got a lot of flair. She's John Manuelian. Let me bring you in on this. John, you know, we're talking about Nicole Alvarez, and, you know, everybody's got an opinion on her, but how do you think she played out? I mean, when you're preparing a witness, did she act the way that you want her to act if you're sitting there defending Conrad Murray?
No, but I'm sure the prosecution...
And it's a prosecution witness, by the way, so it's not as if, you know, there's a difference here, but go ahead.
I'm sure the prosecution met with her and tried to prep her and just said, you know what, I can't prep this girl. She is who she is, and I'm just going to let her do what she's going to do. Because it's better to let a witness be natural than to coach her. You don't want to seem coached.
And she wasn't exactly agreeable with the prosecutor. There were things she wasn't remembering. She was confusing a few things, John. What do you think?
But she did it with flair. That's what matters, right?
I also think it's very interesting, this pharmacist on the stand, and maybe we can go back out to Ted Rowlands on this, because I thought it was pretty fascinating the way he describes the conversations he had with Dr. Conrad Murray about, for example...
John Manuelian, why does she need a lawyer? Why does she need his lawyer?
Well, obviously she feels concerned that she may be liable indirectly or directly, so that's one of the reasons somebody would get a lawyer. Also, it could be to protect Conrad Murray. And by the way, just because you get a lawyer doesn't mean that you're guilty. For example, Arnold Klein and several other doctors were investigated in this case. They weren't charged, but they all got lawyers. One of the reasons you want to get a lawyer, so there's not a misconstrue or miscommunication between the police and your client.
Yeah, but I think that the larger picture here, again, little pieces of the puzzle, with the testimony that this doctor told a pharmacist to ship all this propofol to what he thought was a clinic, but was actually his girlfriend's apartment.
And I got to go back to Nicole Alvarez as well. When Dr. Conrad Murray is setting up a meeting so she can meet Michael Jackson, it just, is that what a professional doctor would do? No, I don't think so. You should be professionally handling Michael Jackson, not trying to show off for your girlfriend.
John, what do you think of that?
I do agree, but you got to understand, it's Michael Jackson. He's an icon. It's not every day that your boyfriend or your husband's working for the largest known icon in the world. You know, but did that sense of fandom overshadow his ability to be doctor-patient with Michael Jackson? Because it seems the indication is, oh, I'm going to introduce my girlfriend to her. Are you going to meet him? He's out telling women, I'm Michael Jackson's doctor. I mean, doesn't sound like the actions of a doctor that we trust. It may not be professional. I wouldn't do it. It may not be ethical. However, it doesn't mean that Conrad Murray is guilty of these charges, which is the key in this case.
Listen, we have to learn something from this case as a culture, and that is that, A, doctors are human beings, and they have the same foibles and the same character defects as the average person, and we shouldn't put them on a pedestal. We should ask them tough questions because we don't know what their personal problems are.
So, John Manuelian, let's get the defense side of this. How do you explain this? And it's not just this point, it's all the points that are just lining up in this case against Dr. Conrad Murray that are starting to scream there was a breach of the standard of care here.
Right. Well, first of all, you need an expert to explain that what he did was what exactly that expert would have done in his position. They're going to have an expert by the name of Paul White. He's the self-professed father of propofol. He's going to tell you 25 milligrams was very small. just enough to sedate somebody, and that 10 minutes is how long it stays in the system. And then after 10 minutes, the patient is safe to walk away from. So
what
they're
about
going to
the
need
setting, though? What about the setting of giving propofol at home?
Well, that's the problem. His biggest problem is leaving the drugs there. That would be like leaving matches with a pyromaniac, and that's the problem that the defense has. They have to show why didn't he breach the standard of care by leaving the drugs, and why did he breach the standard of care by leaving the room.
And the bigger issue that we have to focus in, so we learned something from this case, is that a lot of doctors are in general very ignorant about the addictive nature of the drugs that they are prescribing.